With Memorial Day weekend comes the start of another summer season and the start of another summer of traffic. I'm Joe Shaw, and this is 27 Speaks Behind the Headlines, and we're going to dive into a couple of the issues this week, including the traffic, by talking with staff writers Michael Wright, Cailin Riley, Jack Motz, and features editor Michelle Trauring are all with us today. But we're going to start with Michael Wright. For the topic we could always talk about, Mike, and that's traffic. Traffic is just the regular topic that we can talk about every single week if we chose to, but Memorial Day weekend seems like a good time to have that conversation because the town has been doing some things to try and address traffic congestion in the mornings and the afternoons, but particularly in the afternoons, and it's going to get a real test starting this week. A lot of folks coming into town who haven't seen this. What are they going to see?
Yeah, it is right. It's an afternoon thing is really what will have changed. The morning has been a disaster for 20 years, and I don't know. You could say it keeps getting worse, except that it can't really get any worse. I literally just when I sat down to click the link to join this recording, the email above it was a voicemail recording that was forwarded to us by our editor Bill Sutton, forwarded to me, of a guy who was in his car that was just calling to complain that had taken him 2 hours to get to a doctor's appointment from Quogue in Southampton, and accusing town officials and political. He said it was a political failure. You could feel for the guy. He sounded just absolutely at his wit's end.
So frustrated. There's no question.
It's all. I was standing out on County Road 39 at 2:00 in the morning with a bunch of guys from the USGA last night, and they were sort of huddled over to the side talking about the traffic. And I said, "Oh, hey, you guys sound just like locals because this is all we talk about. I go to the golf course." And that's what everybody talks about.
You were there at 2:00 in the morning
because they had County Road 39 closed, which at that time, everybody was kind of like looking at their watch and doing some figuring in their heads because the lightning storm had delayed them putting the bridge together over County Road 39 for the U.S. Open.
Pedestrian bridge.
So they had County Road 39 closed, and they had already planned to have it reopened at 5 a.m., so they were pushing up against when that morning surge of traffic starts, because it really starts by like 5:30 in the morning now. Like the backups will already begin then, and so they were getting nervous. But the bridge contractors, once they got going, they were hammering. They had the road open at 5:05. Like 5:05.
Yeah, every minute counts.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, the real difference this year from last Memorial Day and last Labor Day is that the town has changed some traffic patterns in an effort to try and keep traffic flowing in the afternoons a little bit better. They did an experiment in the spring of 2025 where they used cops at every intersection west of North Sea Road in Tuckahoe, Southampton, through Tuckahoe, to bypass the traffic signals, to just so that cars never had to stop on County Road 39 when they were westbound in the afternoons. And it made a huge difference. Cars on County Road 39 just kept rolling. It was taking like 7 or 8 minutes to get from North Sea Road to the Lobster Inn, which obviously if you're local, you know where that is. And, that can take 20 minutes, 25 minutes sometimes previously. And so everybody hailed that as a great success, but it was so expensive and so disruptive to just completely shut off those stoplights that some town officials tried to come up with a sort of a facsimile, a slimmed down version of it that would be operable in the long term, without having so much manpower dedicated to it. And so they got Suffolk County Department of Public Works, a little bit against their better judgment, to restripe parts of County Road 39 to narrow it from 2 lanes to 1 lane.
Real big change. I mean, it was.
It doesn't seem like it, but it really is, because they narrowed it from 2 lanes to 1 lane only over about a quarter of a mile of roadway. But what that did was that it allowed them to turn off basically the traffic signal at Sandy Hollow Road. So there's 3 traffic signals east of North Sea Road. they used last spring. They bypassed all three of them. Now they're just bypassing that one. They extended the second one, which is at McGee Street. They have it stay green longer for westbound traffic, but it does then have to turn red for a period of time, which stops traffic, which, immediately, if you stop them for 40 seconds, it takes 5 times that long for that traffic just to get back to where it was going. And it has this rubber band effect. It's a whole thing. So they're trying it. They tried it over the winter. They tinkered with it here and there. They actually have made it they have extended the 1-lane restriction now east of North Sea Road towards North Main Street in hopes of not having so many cars coming off of County Road 39A and loading that little zone where it forces you to merge into 1 lane. And that's caused some problems to the east of that. So the last 2 days or 3 days, I've been watching it pretty closely, and it's bad in a lot of places, and it seems to be moving traffic a little bit better, maybe, but it's hard to quantify because they didn't really do any baseline data collection beforehand. There was no. I mean, the county has all of that. The county does that, but they have not been participating in this really.
It's interesting because in your story you mentioned that they really didn't. They don't have an idea of success here because they didn't really sort of plan that out in advance. And the county has been sort of hands off, right? They're not really in favor of a lot of this.
Yeah, they were very reluctant to allow the town to do this. They certainly weren't encouraging the town to do this. In fact, at the first meeting they had, they actively discouraged the town from doing this. Some of the engineers who, politicians are politicians and bureaucrats are bureaucrats, but the engineers are just a very no nonsense, data driven folks, and they just said, yeah, what you didn't really make a difference. But everybody who drove through it all the time was like, yes, it did. The anecdotal difference was like, it was obviously a huge improvement. And the engineers just kind of like looked to the side and shook their heads. But, they relented and said, it's your stretch of roadway, even though it's their road. And since they don't have any solution, right? They don't have anything to offer other than that they want to build like a $15 billion bypass through northern Bridgehampton and Watermill like they wanted to do in 1965. So they don't have anything to offer really. So they just said, all right, well, you can try it. And I have a feeling that even though they've restriped this road, everybody has looked at this as still being an experiment. And
the experiment gets its big test starting this week.
Through the winter, there was still a lot of talk among the board members and town officials like, we need to decide if we're going to go back to the way it was before summer started. Well, summer's here now, and we've got it, so we're going to ride it out through the summer and see how it goes.
Let's see how it goes, and we'll be back and we'll check in every once in a while and see how things are going.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about this.
And people will talk about it. It won't take much.
I looked at Google Maps, and last night it was 14 minutes from the office here on Windmill Lane to the Lobster Inn, but that was not taking County Road 39. Google Maps wanted to take me out Hill Street and then down back roads in the village, which is exactly what they're trying to avoid cars doing.
Best of luck out there. It's not going to be easy getting around.
Apps rule the day.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate your reporting on this.
Yeah.
Let's go to Jack Motz. He's our East Hampton reporter. Hey, Jack.
Hey, Joe.
And when we have you on, we're almost always talking about housing and affordable housing, which I think says something about East Hampton. East Hampton town is really been active as far as affordable housing, and they're really trying to get some things done over there. But this past week, some big news came down on Monday regarding a project that's called Cantwell Court that's been sort of held up for a little while, but it got a really big boost this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, it's kind of like traffic for Southampton, housing in East Hampton. So same sort of deal. But yeah, so Cantwell Court basically got $7 million from the state to in-state funding to go towards that development. It's a 16-unit development. It's going to be single-family homes, and what that money is going to go towards is these sort of cross mods, and they're called that because they're a cross between kind of more like a traditional single-family house and more of like a modular house that you would kind of build on the site. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. It's been a couple months since they applied. They applied in October of last year, and they've kind of been waiting for the state to answer on what the status is there.
Yeah, it's a big deal when you can start building with something like a modular unit because it really cuts the costs down, and that's the key factor here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, what happened was, and the reason they needed to apply for this, or the reason they chose to apply for this, was because the bids came in very high. It was going to be about $600,000 per unit from Habitat for Humanity, which is very expensive. And as David Lease pointed out in a meeting, that when you build affordable housing, it actually needs to be affordable. That's kind of a key point, right?
Yes.
So these cross mods came in probably about half that, which is really huge. That's saving a lot of money. They're going to go to people who are within. The original plan, I think, was to have them within 100% AMI, area median income, but I think that's going up to about 130%, which is kind of traditional affordable housing in town for people of a moderate income.
Yeah, and they need to get some buildings put up, right? Because I mean, the demand is there, and East Hampton's been pretty successful in getting some affordable housing built. But this is all about, I think everybody's in favor of more housing, but they actually have to start getting some structures up. And Cantwell Court is a good place to start.
Right. Yeah, and I think that getting into the politics of it a little bit, this has been something that has kind of been in the crosshairs politically in the race that's going on right now. It's whether it's a stalled project or not. Now it's obviously not. It's moving forward. There's going to be 16 units there. They're going to be sited by this summer. I didn't get an answer on move-in date yet, but I might do a follow-up this week that'll iron out those details and a couple other details that they needed to get from the state before they could tell us. But yeah, so I mean, it's yeah, as you said, it's about getting houses built, it's about getting houses up, and it's about getting people living in those houses. And this is a town board that's really kind of identified that as a major issue. If you had to choose one issue that they're really, really, really hammering away at, it's housing. There's a couple of things that are pending with the board right now that they're trying to do. A couple of things that they recently just passed. Some are probably going to create, more bigger developments. Some are a little bit more tailored to lower footprint, kind of smaller developments that'll be done on more of an individual basis. This site itself, Cantwell Court, it's kind of, when you're driving by on the highway, it's kind of deceptive. You can't really see much back there, but when you go in, the way the road is structured, it really opens up back there. All that lot is cleared. There's a lot of space. It's a pretty big thing that's kind of tucked away. I think it's a 7-acre property total. So it's kind of small lots, but yeah, it really opens up when you get back there. And now there's going to be folks living in those and living on that road, and not too long, not too distant
Big,
future.
big conversations about affordable housing all the time in East Hampton. I know, just very briefly, there was also a move this week. The board has been looking at trying employee-owned housing, and they added one little element to that idea, which is
So basically, yeah. So they have this code change that's pending. It's for employer-owned housing developments to kind of allow those and enumerate the standards. And really, when they brought it back after a public hearing, the one thing they added a couple things, but the really big one is a 1-year lease minimum in the draft code. And it was actually kind of interesting. Ian Calder-Piedmont, a councilman, he brought it up, and it was kind of a little bit unlike him, but from what I know about him and from what I've seen, in that usually he's not someone to kind of just tack things on at the end, but that's how it came up. It was kind of interesting, actually. They were going through some changes that they'd like to see in this code, and he said, oh, by the way, I think this would be a good thing. He's also not usually someone to kind of lobby for those sorts of restrictions, from what I've noticed. So it was kind of an interesting thing. It's a big change, because a big point from which people were criticizing this code change was that this is going to just be for transient workers. It's going to be a
sure.
seasonal thing.
Provides a little
and
bit of stability at least.
and local businesses, yeah, exactly, and local businesses won't be able to afford this, which doesn't having a 1 year minimum doesn't change that factor, but I think it kind of does alleviate some of those, or the goal is to alleviate some of those concerns that it's just going to be completely unregulated, it's going to be a disaster, and it's going to just be big corporations buying these for staff housing, which the
Yeah.
goal is for business housing, but
Yeah, which and they do exist out here already, but it's an interesting.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's going to be innovative if they put it through. So good reporting on that stuff. We're going to be talking about it many, many more times in the coming months. So thanks, Jack.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, Joe.
I want to bring in Cailin Riley, one of our staff writers. Hey, Cailin.
Hi there.
So the Express this week had one of those stories that I love because it's one of those stories that I didn't know. I had no idea Sag Harbor had a connection to the rainbow flag, which is something that has become just a very common a thing we see all the time. I had no idea Sag Harbor played a role in that. Talk about that.
This was one of my favorite stories I think I've ever written. It was really, really so exciting. I have to give credit to North Haven Village Mayor Chris Fiore because he pitched this idea to me. So Dee Dee McNamara, who lives in North Haven, he was chatting with her and they were talking about how her cousin, James, or as he was mostly known to people, Jimmy McNamara, was one of the original creators of the two original rainbow flags that were made in California in 1978. So he was the lead seamster of that flag. So he got together with a bunch of different people, Lynn Segerblom and his partner Gilbert Baker. So he met them when he was out in California in San Francisco. And Harvey Milk was the one that had asked Gilbert Baker, we need something to kind of unify this movement. They were having a gay pride event in San Francisco and they wanted some type of symbol that was going to unite them together. So Gilbert Baker had the original idea for the flag and bringing all the colors together. And actually each color at that time represented a different idea or value. And then a bunch of people got together and one of them was Jimmy and he was the one who stitched it together. And Lynn was the one who took these flags were huge and she took these large strips of muslin and dyed them the different colors. And so they had to, hang them out and then stitch them together. The two original flags ended up flying at the United Nations and in DC and then went back to San Francisco. But he worked on sewing those together. But he did not grow up out in Sag Harbor, but spent a lot of time there in the summer. And
And I love that your story said he found it as sort of a refuge.
yes.
That he found a lot more acceptance as a gay man in Sag Harbor than he did elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think it was just a place where he felt he could be himself. When I was talking to Dee Dee, she still had this kind of magical gleam in her eye when she was talking about how they would spend, these idyllic summers together. They would go down to the beach and look for crabs and clams. And, she said with a little gleam in her eye, they would smoke cigarettes down at the beach. And, she said they didn't really ever talk about his sexuality. It was just something they didn't even need to discuss. He just felt accepted there. He would go have breakfast at the Paradise, and then he would go to the flower shop to see Mrs. Carruthers. So this was the flower shop that was in the same building as the American Hotel years ago. And he just felt it was a refuge for him because in school, he went to school in the city, and in school, it was hard for him. He was very, different and stood out and just had a tough time.
I just think it's fascinating that this all happened and that has become such a recognizable symbol, not just for the Pride movement, but just for diversity in general. And I think we should take some real pride in the fact that the local community had some small role in that. It's a great story. You always tell great stories, Cailin, and this was one of those great stories. And it was nice that I got to learn something. So thanks for that.
Of course.
Appreciate it. Let me bring in Michelle Trauring, our features editor. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Joe.
Speaking of great storytellers, you had another great story to tell this week, and it's about a local organization that's celebrating a milestone. I don't know, I don't know how many people take time to really appreciate East End Hospice and what a great organization that is. But you really gave them an opportunity to have their moment in the spotlight. What wonderful work they do. Talk about that a little bit.
It really is amazing. And I think it's one of those organizations that you don't necessarily know about until you need them.
Exactly.
And the work that they do is obviously very sad. You know, they're caring for people in an inpatient facility in their last few days. And at the same time, a few of the people who I interviewed over the last few weeks, they used the word joyous, and they felt a little hesitant to use it. They would like say it and then they would kind of walk it back really fast. But I do think at the heart of this work that these like amazing physicians and nurses and social workers and bereavement counselors and administrators, the heart of it is this celebration of life, of the people who come to the Cailin Center for Hospice Care, which is really nestled into the landscape on Quiog. They just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. And in those 10 years, they've cared for 3,000 patients. And that number, to me, was jaw-dropping. I couldn't believe 3,000 people. And
This
not
was
only,
is this just at the Canis Center?
Yes.
Is just 3,000 people, and the 10th anniversary, we should say, is of the Canis Center, right?
yes, correct.
Yes, I just want to be clear about that. The
Yep.
hospice has been around for a bit longer than that,
Yep.
but yeah, 3,000 people is a remarkable number for one facility.
It really is. And not only those people, but their loved ones. And Mary Crosby, who's the president and CEO of the parent organization, East End Hospice, and therefore the Canis Center, she said that on average, every death touches about 8 people. So if we think about that, that is an exponential ripple effect across the East End. So for people who don't know about East End Hospice or the Canis Center for Hospice Care, they likely have been touched by it some way and they just don't realize it, which is pretty incredible.
So talk about what the Canis Center does that's so amazing.
Sure. So they have inpatient suites, which are gorgeous. And in those suites, families or friends or caregivers will bring their loved ones where they kind of live out the rest of their days. And it's somewhat the equivalent of home hospice care, but this adds another level of support. So, you know, caregiving is very taxing on family members and loved ones. So this gives comfort to not only the patient, but also the people who are caring for them, and just kind of provides a lot of peace during arguably one of the worst times in everyone's lives. So it's really just compassionate care 24/7. There's no limit on visitation. People can come and go whenever they want. The facility itself is spectacular. It's stunning. There's full-length glass doors that open up in each suite where you can wheel the bed out onto the patio. One woman I spoke to who brought her mother there said that a bald eagle landed on the patio 2 separate days, and it was just such an incredible setting to be. There's a rock garden, there's nature paths. It's just very much folded into the landscape, which, I mean, I don't know about you, but that sounds good to me.
And I mean, I
Place to
think
go.
you really touched on it in the story and in this conversation, that this is sad because it's the end of someone's life, but that's not the focus. The focus is really about making their final days and really celebrating their lives and giving them the space and the support to do that is a way. When you talk about end of life care, I think many of us think of utilitarian kinds of things, but this is so supportive for the emotional and the spiritual side.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Mary Crosby was telling me that when she worked as an oncology nurse, she'll never forget the day that she saw a patient pass away in a hallway on a gurney. And, you know, there must be something else that is the in-between of a hospital and a home. And I think that for a lot of people, like, this is their home for those final days, which is so special. You know, they also offer ministry. So I chatted with Pastor Bob, who's a delight, and he said that he kind of parachutes into people's lives and figures out what they may need. And he said that more oftentimes than not, when he goes into a room, he doesn't know if he's there for the patient or for the family or for both. He kind of has to get like a quick read on the situation and make really quick connections. And that's what he does day in and day out, which is amazing.
Amazing stuff, and they do amazing work there. It's great to give them a chance in the spotlight. Thank you for doing that, Michelle. Those stories are all at 27east.com. I'm Joe Shaw. Thank you for listening to 27 Speaks Behind the Headlines. See you next week.